What if I told you some of this and some of this exists today because of a brilliant use of planning and tax policy? Nearly everyone has a place like this that they love. An interesting and charming historic area where you can visit a local market, business, or cafe. But unfortunately, much fewer people actually know what goes into making sure that these places thrive. Hi, I'm Sarah, and welcome to Saranthropus, where I explain how preservation and heritage go into shaping the world that we live in and love. In this video, we're looking at how historic preservation tax credits go into saving old buildings to turn into beloved community spaces. So let's go on a field trip to see how a little-known partnership between the National Park Service, IRS, and your state government go into building some of your favorite places. We are here at the MARTA station because we are going on a field trip to a really awesome place in Old Fourth Ward. So we're going to Ponce City Market, which used to be the Sears Roebuck & Company warehouse. It was a huge distribution center in Atlanta. It was decommissioned in 1987, and since then, a developer has purchased the property, used historic preservation tax credits to revitalize it, and it has become a hub for local business. And we're also doing something I have never done before, which is to take the MARTA bus. I've taken the MARTA trains, but never the bus, so this is gonna be fun. I'm so excited because I've never taken the MARTA bus, only the MARTA train. I've never taken other buses, but this is my first MARTA ride. I remember when this was just an empty or like 70% empty building. This doorway says retail store on the front. So the way that these old Sears Roebuck warehouses would work basically was that they had like a retail portion and then there was the warehouse portion as well. And they wouldn't have had like modern lighting, obviously. So all these big windows are made to where the light could actually shine in on the merchandise that they were trying to sell. If you live in Atlanta, it's almost impossible to imagine the city without Ponce City Market. Today, it's a major gathering place, full of restaurants, shops, apartments, offices, and public space. A place where the community comes to live, work, and connect. But this building wasn't always a hot spot. For most of its life, this massive complex was the Sears Roebuck & Company warehouse and distribution center, built in 1926 to serve the entire southeast region. It says on grand opening on August 2nd, 1926, 30,000 shoppers passed through these doors. That's amazing. I wonder how many people like shop here on a daily basis now. If you're unfamiliar with Sears, think of it as the Amazon in the 1900s. They had a stranglehold on retail and commerce, mostly due to the Sears Roebuck & Company catalog, where you could mail order nearly anything from toys, furniture, entire kit houses, and surprisingly, even opium. The Sears Roebuck & Company building covered 4 acres and was the largest brick building in the South. Now, for a building in the South to be the biggest brick building in the South, that's huge because the majority of our buildings are, in fact, brick. But by the late 20th century, Sears had left. The building sat underused, and it briefly served as Atlanta's City Hall East. The entire Ponce corridor was struggling with low economic activity. A structure this huge, over 2 million square feet, could just as easily have become another demolition statistic. Instead, it became one of the most successful adaptive reuse projects in the entire United States. And the thing that made that transformation possible wasn't accidental. It was the use of the Federal Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program. This tax credit is designed to encourage the rehabilitation of historic buildings through income-producing development, especially large commercial ones like this. But it's not a blank check. In order to receive the credit, developers have to follow the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. Those standards require that a building's historic character be preserved and incorporated into the new design rather than being erased or glossed over. And that's why when you walk through Ponce City Market today, you don't just see trendy restaurants and tech offices, you see the bones of the building's industrial past everywhere you look. So many historic details that are original to the building's original use as the Sears Roebuck and Company warehouse. And you can see on this staircase that these little lights in these windows are hand-blown glass, and you can tell that they're hand-blown because this little dot right here is what's called a scar. And so each one of these little glass pieces was hand-blown to include in this staircase. Interesting features like historic freight scales and rail cars are still prominent in the modern design. Switchboards, gauges, industrial doors, and freight elevators remain in place not because they're nostalgic decorations, but because they're character-defining features that tell the story of what this building once was. So we're stopping for a coffee break, and I just want to give a little shout out to Spiller Park Coffee because not only are they super good, but they also have a habit of occupying like historic retail space in the Atlanta area, and they always are so true to the materials that are there before they move in. So awesome. Thank you, Spiller Park. The standards ensure that the past is not lost in the process of creating something new, and that's part of what gives this place its distinct identity. It's not a generic mall or a sterile interior, it's a real building with a real history, and you feel it the moment you step inside. And the impact of this project didn't stop at the building's walls. Revitalizing Ponce City Market helped catalyze reinvestment along the entire Ponce de Leon corridor, which is one of Atlanta's major east-west arteries. And a huge part of that momentum comes from the fact that Ponce City Market opens directly onto the Atlanta Beltline. By giving people a seamless car-free way to reach the building, the Beltline floods this space with foot traffic, cyclists, and everyday activity. It turns the building into a true urban crossroads, a place you can naturally pass through rather than just having to drive to. Once the anchor building was stabilized and brought back to life, new businesses followed. Streetscape improvements also followed, housing options expanded, neighborhoods became more connected, and the Beltline's arrival only amplified that momentum. A corridor that once signaled decline is now a thriving, walkable, economically vibrant part of the city. And much of that can be traced back to the decision to rehabilitate this historic structure rather than let it sit empty or tear it down. This is especially obvious when you look at the Google Street View from 2007 to 2025. What was once an environment hostile to pedestrian traffic is now full of bike lanes, people, and safer streets. This is the power of historic preservation tax credits. They don't just incentivize the preservation of historic buildings, they shape communities, boost economic activity, and create places people genuinely love spending time in. And Ponce City Market is one of the clearest examples of what happens when a city embraces its past as the foundation for its future. Frankly, all of this footage is beautiful to look at, but if we stop the music for just a second, what's especially striking is how Ponce City Market sounds when it's full of life. Okay, but does a successful historic tax credit project have to be a retail-oriented space in a dense urban environment? All right, not always. We're now standing at the Newnan Factory Lofts, which is a housing development down here in Newnan, Georgia, about 40 miles south of Atlanta. So this is far from an urban landscape, but it does serve as an important economic and retail hub for the surrounding rural areas. So this is a housing development that actually used to serve as the Newnan cotton mill back in the 1880s and was a really important part of West Georgia's thriving textile industry. When the mill was decommissioned in the 1990s, architects and developers leveraged the historic preservation tax credits to turn this into a housing development that has consistently maintained about 98% occupancy rates. Industrial architecture like the Newnan Cotton Mill wasn't built on the outskirts of town. These factories predate automobile infrastructure and widespread car ownership, so mill villages, like the one pictured here, were intentionally located within walking distance. Because workers needed goods and the mill needed storefronts to sell some of its products to locals, the textile industry directly influenced the development of and shaped the historic downtown that is still thriving in Newnan today. The proximity of these places to one another was driven by basic human need, and the fact that the Newnan Cotton Mill has been reinvented as housing is instrumental to the continued success of the small local businesses that fill historic downtown Newnan in 2025. It took us about 7 minutes to walk from the lofts to the center of downtown, where we were able to grab coffee and checked out a very highly recommended new sandwich shop. The level of walkability in the town's historic core is only being amplified by the recent addition of the Newnan Link, a multi-use path and linear park system that will further connect the historic core to neighborhoods that have been car-centric for decades. Accessibility to Newnan's historic downtown is extremely important. Because of the early use of the historic preservation tax credits, not only did the city's core avoid the post-industrial decline that we've seen in so many other places across the United States, but multiple studies in recent decades show that customers and clients who arrive by walking or cycling are some of the most reliable supporters of local businesses. A 2018 article by Strong Towns emphasizes that again and again, when we look at streets that are oriented towards people, where walking is safe and enjoyable, we find that they are more economically productive than any other style of development. And it's not because pedestrians spend more per visit, but because they make more frequent, easier trips each month, leading to higher spending overall. And there are other benefits too. Adaptive reuse is significantly more sustainable than demolition and new construction, saving both materials and the massive carbon cost of rebuilding from scratch. Because all of the stone, mortar, glass, and brick that you see in these buildings has already been quarried, transported, or manufactured. The favorite quote of a preservationist is, "The greenest building is the one already built." These projects also make use of existing streets, utilities, and infrastructure, keeping costs down for city taxpayers and supporting new housing without excessive sprawl. And it's really important to know that historic preservation tax credits aren't easily abused. Developers only receive the credit after the work is done and the building is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, meaning the public sees the benefit, the housing, the investment, the revitalized building, long before any credit is realized. It's a model where public investment inevitably results in public return. And finally, projects like this help communities keep their identity. When you preserve and reuse the buildings that shaped a town's history, people feel more rooted in where they live. A place like the Newnan Cotton Mill tells the story of how this town grew, and now, through preservation, it's helping write the next chapter, all while people stay connected and local businesses thrive. Places like the ones we've seen today remind us that old buildings aren't just outdated bricks and beams, they're opportunities. Opportunities to reuse and love what we already have, respect the heritage and history of a place, and to create community spaces that people actually want to be a part of. If this kind of behind-the-scenes look at preservation policy was interesting to you, consider subscribing and let me know in the comments below if there's a historic city, an old building, or an archaeological site with a story that you think is worth unpacking. Thanks for watching, and I will see you at the next super awesome place.